welcome to the Watchman. Well, is 2014 the year of Vladimir Putin? The Russian leader is on the move and he does not fear the West. What about the Iranian regime? They're very close to having a nuclear weapon, which they will not hesitate to use. How about General Sisi in Egypt? He's the most powerful man in the most populous and influential Arab nation. Then there is Syria, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Hamas. So many storylines already on the international scene. Wars and rumors of wars. And guess what? It will all eventually affect you sitting there at home. Yes, folks, what happens over there does matter over here. And joining me to discuss how is an all-star panel of CBN News reporters. Joining us from Virginia Beach, Senior International Correspondent Gary Lane and Senior Editor John Waage. And joining us from Jerusalem is our Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Let's start, Chris, with you and one of the Obama administration's major foreign policy initiatives. That's the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. It seems like that's pretty much dead in the water right now, despite John Kerry's best efforts. What's your sense of this in Israel, Chris? And is there a sense that the Obama administration is blaming Israel for the failure of the talks once again?
There's a definite sense over here in Israel that the Obama administration is blaming Israel. Just a few days ago, Kerry was at a Senate committee where he talked about the things that Israel had done, and then he said, poof, the negotiations were over. And that poof really has resonated over here. There's been pushback by the Netanyahu government about that. And the Netanyahu government actually faces a sort of a mini crisis right now because Naftali Bennett, which heads up one of the major parties in Netanyahu's coalition, is threatening if there is an agreement and certain conditions are met in that agreement, he's going to get out of the government. So there's a threat to that. And I think, Eric, what's going to come down to the main issue facing the Israelis and Palestinians is the issue of the city of Jerusalem and what's going to happen there. Just a little while ago, we interviewed a man named Abu Ala, member of the PA and the PLO, and he said there'll be no negotiations unless Jerusalem is the capital of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, and that's why everyone watching needs to pick up your book, Chris, Dateline Jerusalem. Well, gentlemen, the breakdown of talks between Israel and the Palestinians is just the latest foreign policy disaster for the Obama administration. You know, Senator John McCain took Secretary of State John Kerry to task about it recently, and it wasn't pretty. Let's take a look.
My hero, Teddy Roosevelt, used to say, talk softly but carry a big stick. What you're doing is talking strongly and carrying a very small stick. In fact, a twig.
I guess it's pretty easy to lob those judgments around, but particularly well before the verdict is in on any of them. Israel-Palestine. It's interesting that you declare it dead, but the Israelis and the Palestinians don't declare it dead. They want to continue to negotiate.
We'll see, won't we, Mr. Secretary?
Beg your pardon?
We'll see.
Well, yeah, we will see, but why
It's
declare
stopped.
it dead
It is
today?
stopped. Recognize reality.
Okay, John, let's start with Russia. What is Vladimir Putin's next move beyond Crimea, and is there anything we can do about it at this point?
Well, Eric, you know, he's kind of unpredictable these days. I think it's a little bit like a python who has just swallowed a gazelle. You know, it takes a little while to digest, and I think that Putin has achieved what he wanted to achieve, namely the restoration of Russia as a contender on the world stage, somebody that needs to be looked at, admired by the West, feared by the West. They may not admire the way he went about it, but Russia's making its presence felt on the world stage, and I think that's exactly what Putin wanted, and it's reflected in his popularity within Russia itself. It's gone through the roof. And, you know, he's got to feel a little bit like he's dealing with the Keystone Cops when it comes to Washington, D.C. right now. You mentioned off the top of the show, Eric, that Putin doesn't fear the West. I don't think he likes the West very much either, and I think that that's been gathering in his mind over the last decade or so. In 2005, he called the fall of the Soviet Empire in the 20th century the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century, and lately he's taken a dig at American exceptionalism. So everywhere he can along the way, he's been signaling that the restoration of Russia's reputation and Russia's strength as a nation is something he's all about.
Yeah, John, as you said, this is a guy who bemoaned the collapse of the Soviet Empire, was an admirer of none other than Joseph Stalin. So we're getting the real Vladimir Putin right now. So much for the reset button. Gary, do you believe Putin was emboldened by President Obama's handling of Iran and Syria? Did this embolden him to move on Ukraine?
No doubt about it, Eric. Let's first look at Syria and what the Obama administration did or did not do there. The president had a red line. Assad, the president of Syria, constantly crossed that red line. What did the United States do? Nothing. And so we worked this deal on chemical weapons, but Assad has repeatedly missed the deadlines. He missed one at the end of last year, again in February, again in March. So far, only about half of his chemical weapons have been turned over. He's supposed to turn all of them over by the end of June. We hear nothing from the Obama administration when he violates that agreement. Iran, another violator of agreements. We have this temporary 6-month agreement with Iran, and we've had a partial lifting of sanctions. It allows about $4 billion of assets to be unfrozen from Western banks. So they're enjoying that. The Iranians are enjoying that. Part of that agreement also is to allow them only to sell 1 million barrels of oil a day. So far, they've been violating that, at least 1.5 million a day. Any word from the Obama administration on that? No. So there is no toughness here, no words from the administration against these two gentlemen who are violating agreements that were weak agreements to begin with. And so when there is a void in U.S. foreign policy, a void in U.S. leadership, someone has to fill that void. So Vladimir Putin stepped in. He says, look, I'm going to be strong. I'm going to move 30,000 troops into Crimea and put pressure on eastern Ukraine at this time. It's all because there's void.
And Russia and Iran, Gary, right now are apparently discussing a major multi-billion-dollar oil deal, which would help Iran further skirt sanctions. And by the way, we'll expect, I suppose, many more shirtless shots of Vladimir Putin riding a grizzly bear and taming a Siberian tiger, as we've seen over the past few years. Mr. Putin has a healthy ego, to say the least. Chris, speaking of Syria, where President Obama, as Gary said, set a red line and then he didn't have a red line, what is the view from Israel on the chaos unfolding on its border with Syria? Look, 150,000 people killed so far in that Syrian civil war. What are they saying in Jerusalem about this?
Well, right now, what's happened on the Israeli-Syrian border for the first time in nearly a generation, almost 40 years, the border that had been quiet, the quietest border that Israel had, is becoming a hot border. They're very concerned about this Islamic groups that are fighting the Assad regime, and they control some of the area near the border right now. Although they don't pose a severe military threat right now, the concern is if they do overthrow the Assad regime, it's not, we'll see what happens there. But if they ever get weapons of mass destruction, what would happen then? So they're seeing this as a very dire danger there on Israel's northern border. And to Gary's point, Eric, one of the major storylines here in the Middle East is that the lack of American power and presence is leaving a vacuum. And as Gary said, Vladimir Putin is filling that. So the allies of the United States, you can talk to Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, they're very scared of what's happening now and the consequences of this withdrawal of American power and presence.
Yeah, Chris, I thought it was interesting recently to see Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Alon say, hey, when it comes to Iran, we realize now we're pretty much on our own. Gary, you've spent a lot of time on the ground in Syria. How bad is the situation there for Christians right now?
Oh, I would say out of the entire world, it is the most dangerous place to be a Christian. It is like genocide being committed against Christians there. When Islamists come into many rural towns and villages and they impose Sharia law, Christians either are forced to convert, they're forced to leave or die. And many of them have left. Let's give you one recent example. At the end of March, there's a town near the coast there in Syria called Kasab. Kasab had about 2,500 Armenian Christians that were forced to leave there. Islamist fighters came in, and some actually spoke Turkish to them. So that brings up a whole reminiscent of 1915 and the genocide that Turkey committed against Armenians. So they're revisiting that again. And what they want to know is, what was Turkey's role in this? Did they have people on the ground there? Was Turkey involved in supporting al-Qaeda in Syria? And it seems that way. And Christians, a tough situation for them. Many have left, and we need to keep them in prayer.
Gary, it's interesting. I'm going to ask you about Turkey in the next segment. I recently did a report on how Turkey is embracing terrorists. Very dangerous. A NATO ally, supposedly. John, last question. We have about 30 seconds left. Is Iran the big winner in Syria? And are the nuclear talks that the Obama administration is so eager to hang on to, are they having any effect at all with Iran?
Well, Iran is the big quiet winner. I think Putin is the big public winner as far as the situation in Syria goes. The talks are not having any kind of effect except a negative one, and that is that as long as Iran's nuclear buildup is under the guise of talks, they're going to proceed with what they want to proceed with, and that's a dangerous thing for Israel, for the United States, and for the world.
Yeah, well, John, much more coming up on this. How all of these events unfolding halfway around the world affect you at home. That's right, you at home here in America. Much more coming up with our CBN News All Star panel from Virginia Beach, from Jerusalem, from right here in Washington, D.C. Don't move. Stay tuned.
Attention sleep apnea patients. Are you tired of the expense and hassle of getting your CPAP and BiPAP supplies? Are you fed up with dealing with ill-fitting, leaking, or worn-out masks and straps? Are you worried about the effects that unsanitary tubes, cushions, and filters have on your health? If you said yes to any of these questions, Allied Medical Supply Network has the solution to your problems. You could qualify to have your supplies regularly delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. That's right, no more inconvenience, no worn-out masks and straps, no more unsanitary equipment, just restful sleep. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today to determine if you may qualify to receive your fresh, brand-name supplies at little or no cost. Don't delay. Call us now to see if you are eligible to save money on regular delivery of your CPAP and BiPAP supplies. Call 1-800-815-9947. That's 1-800-815-9947. Or go to cpapsupplyhelpline.com.
Announcing an important breakthrough in healthcare that can benefit everyone. If you or anyone you love needs affordable health insurance, regardless of a pre-existing medical condition, call Quick Insurance 123 today and get the immediate relief you deserve. Quick Insurance 123 was created to provide affordable health insurance to all uninsured Americans, with or without pre-existing conditions. This is not a discount card. This is a real insurance program that lets you choose from many affordable health plans, with access to doctors, hospitals, emergency services, and more. So call the number on your screen now and get the health coverage you need, just for calling. As a special bonus, we'll send you a free prescription savings card that could save you up to 85% on your prescriptions. That's right, you could save up to 85% on your prescriptions, just for calling. Call Quick Insurance 123 to find out how you can get affordable health insurance and receive your free prescription savings card, just for calling. Don't wait. Getting a free quote is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Call today.
Welcome back. We're talking with our CBN News All Star panel, Gary Lane, John Waage, and Chris Mitchell, about what's going on in the world and how it affects you. Chris, you're coming to us from Jerusalem, the center of the world. We know Iran is an existential threat for Israel, but why should Americans also be concerned about that looming Iranian bomb?
Well, one way that Americans should be concerned, Eric, and I know you've mentioned this before, it's one word, missiles. They not only have missiles designed for Israel, but they're also designing missiles for the United States of America. Right now, Iran has missiles that can hit Israel. So why do they need these long-range missiles, these ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles? So one day, if they want, they can reach the United States of America. If you take an ICBM, we've talked to an expert years ago, you can put a missile anywhere in the world if you want. And the reason they want to do that is part of the ideology. They see Israel as the little Satan, and they see the United States as the great Satan. And one day they want to really take over the Middle East, but on their way to taking over the world. And so Americans really need to be concerned about Iran's nuclear program and also their missile program.
Yeah, there's only one thing you can do with an ICBM, Chris, and that's mount it with a nuclear weapon. That's the sole purpose for the existence of an intercontinental ballistic missile, which Iran is working on feverishly. John, how about Russia? You know, say Putin continues to make waves and solidify his relationship with Iran. How does that affect Americans, a burgeoning Iran-Russia relationship?
Well, it makes the world more dangerous, and if you're not going to intervene to stop something that's dangerous early on, then you reap consequences that are bigger and sadder. down the road. And that's what Americans have to be concerned about. Look, you know, back in a few months before the attack on Pearl Harbor in World War I, 91% of Americans wanted absolutely no involvement whatsoever in World War II, in the war that was going on at the time in Europe. And understandable. I mean, Americans are sick of the police actions, wars that we've had to take since 2001, since we were attacked on our soil. But the reality is that a Russian alliance with Iran is going to make the whole Middle East and that whole Caucasus area a very dangerous place, with skyrocketing oil prices, gas prices, not to mention the threat of a breakout of a hot war in 6 or 7 different locations. So that's why Americans need to be concerned.
You know, recalls Ezekiel 38, 39, the war of Gog and Magog, which we've talked about many times here on CBN News, that Russia-Persia alliance. Gary, I want to ask you about another country you mentioned briefly in the last segment. You've spent a lot of time in Turkey. It's a NATO country, but it has taken a turn towards radical Islam under the Erdogan government. Why should Americans care about what's going on in Turkey?
Well, because it is a NATO ally, and you know the U.S. spends about a quarter of its budget, or of the NATO budget, comes from the United States. But in addition to that, 80 million people, Eric, and as you know, there's this drifting, you've reported on this drifting towards radical Islam. And it was Kemal Ataturk who started a secular government there after the Ottoman Empire broke up. And it's in the benefit of the Middle East. Turkey is an influencer in the Middle East. It's to the benefit of stability in the Middle East to have a secular democratic government, one that large in the Middle East. It's the gateway to the Middle East, right near Lebanon, Syria, and Israel, and also has influence on Egypt and other countries throughout the region.
Speaking of Egypt, Gary, I hate to cut you off.
No,
we're going to talk about Egypt in the next segment. Coming up, what's next for the most influential Arab nation, Egypt? Find out after the break.
The American Bible Challenge is back. Premiering May 22nd at 8/7 Central. Jeff Foxworthy is ready to play.
The whole family's gonna love it.
Kurt Franklin's gonna sway.
Are you ready?
And you'll see the Bible in a whole new way.
Don't I look chic? That was impressive.
An all-new season premieres Thursday, May 22nd at 8/7 Central. Only on Game Show Network.
Pat Boone here with some good news you can trust. Today, our faith, families, and our freedoms are under attack. Polls say 2 out of 3 Americans no longer trust government. A stalled economy, weakening dollar, and politicians willing to steal money from our children to waste on unfixable problems. So, whom can you trust? Well, our money still says in God we trust. But do we? Or have we quietly allowed the things we hold sacred to be stolen by the enemies of traditional values? Today, our government spends almost twice its income, running up a tab for future generations into the hundreds of trillions. How can you stop this from happening to your family? Well, it's all covered in a fantastic new book, The Great Withdrawal by Craig Smith and Dr. Lowell Ponte. Every American needs to read this book. Why don't you call now for a free copy of The Great Withdrawal? It's the simple truth you can trust.
The American Bible Challenge is back. Premiering May 22nd at 8/7 Central. Jeff Foxworthy is ready to play.
The whole family's gonna love it.
Kurt Franklin's gonna sway.
Are you ready?
And you'll see the Bible in a whole new way.
Don't I look chic? That was impressive.
An all-new season premieres Thursday, May 22nd at 8/7 Central. Only on Game Show Network.
And welcome back. Well, Egypt holds presidential elections at the end of May, and General Sisi is a virtual shoo-in to win. John, is this a good thing for America, a Sisi victory? And how badly has the Obama administration bungled Egypt since 2011 and Hosni Mubarak's fall?
Well, Eric, I think it is a good thing for the United States if al-Sisi wins big in this election. I'm not sure Washington will know it's a good thing, though. The bungling has just been legendary. I mean, President Obama went to Cairo and made his whole basically reset with the Arab world speech early in his presidency, and his alignment with the Muslim Brotherhood, when you saw the millions of people that turned out in the streets to protest against the Muslim Brotherhood, you know that was a miscalculation. And it had been, as you well know, having written the book, Eric, you know that the United States has been cultivating that relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood for years.
For a long time, for sure.
And it has not helped the current situation that we're in now.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because I almost feel like the power base from the Brotherhood is moving from the Middle East to the West in many ways, especially with a receptive Obama administration. Gary, you've spent a lot of time on the ground in Egypt as well. How do the Egyptian people view Sisi, and how do they view America?
Well, they love Sisi because he's the one who got rid of the Brotherhood and is restoring stability to the country. They see him as the best chance to develop a more prosperous Egypt, economically and socially, and one that is freer. And this new constitution is evidence of that. But beyond that, as far as America is concerned, Egyptians love Americans. They're very welcoming to Americans. They want you to come and visit their country, to be involved with them. But they do not like this present administration because it is still defending the Muslim Brotherhood. And they say, look, what is up with Obama and your administration defending the Brotherhood? We don't want them. They're terrorists. Let's support Sisi.
Yeah, Gary, I've spoken to Egyptian officials here in D.C. who are just scratching their heads, and they're saying, why is America supporting terrorists?
Sure.
Muslim Brotherhood, granddaddy of all modern Islamic terrorist groups. Chris, you've also spent time in Egypt. You've had some harrowing experiences there, as we've discussed here in the show. Talk about the plight of Christians in that country, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. According to history, the Apostle Mark established that Christian community in Egypt. What's the situation on the ground right now for the Christian community in Egypt?
Well, the plight of Christians has gone better since the El-Sisi government is taking over. While the Mohamed Morsi government was in effect, it was getting worse and worse for Christians. Right after the overthrow of the government, though, there was a backlash. We were down there in a place called Minya, Egypt, where dozens of orphanages, churches, Christian businesses, and cars were burned and ransacked. I would say it's getting better, but still very difficult for Christians in Egypt sometimes. And I would say especially in rural areas sometimes where the government doesn't have as much sway or control. And so it's still an urgent time to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Egypt.
Yeah, you know, Chris, Israel obviously has, where you're coming to us from right now, Jerusalem, obviously has a long-running peace treaty with Egypt, very important for regional and even world stability, that treaty. What's Israel's view of what is going on next door in Egypt right now?
Well, I would say that they see this as a positive development. I think Israelis, just like some in the Washington, D.C. that you've talked to, I've talked to Egyptians on the street there in Egypt, and they're shaking their heads about the Obama administration's support of the Muslim Brotherhood. We were there just after the El-Sisi government took over, and they were saying, well, how can you, meaning the Obama administration, fight terrorism in Afghanistan and finance it in Egypt? And so it's something that they just couldn't understand. They see it as a positive development in a couple of ways. First of all, the Muslim Brotherhood has been outlawed and banned by the El-Sisi government, and they're also fighting terror, those terror bases in the Sinai Peninsula, which are a direct threat to Israel. And so I think Israel sees what's happening in Egypt is a positive development right now, and I think that's something Americans should see as well.
Yeah, guys, we have about 30 seconds left. Real quick, we have these Egyptian presidential elections coming up. What's your sense? It could be a yes or no answer. What's your sense? Do we see violence during those elections in late May? And is the future of Egypt, is there more violence coming? Gary, what do you think?
I don't see violence with the elections coming up, but I do say that if there is fraud there and it's a rigged election, then you may see some violence. But I don't expect that. International observers will be in place there.
Yeah, John, more chaos going forward with Egypt, do you think?
I think there is going to be more chaos, Eric, but I think that the violence could be limited. I don't think it's going to be what it was during the Mubarak time and the riots against the Muslim Brotherhood.
Chris, we got to wrap it up real quick. What do you think? Yes, no, more instability in Egypt?
Limited, and I think the El-Sisi government's going to do everything they can to suppress that.
It's going to be interesting to watch. Our all-star panel tells us which international stories to watch for. Egypt is one of them for the rest of 2014. After the break, stick around.
Do you have an idea for an invention or a new product? Brian and Alice Jagosh, the inventors of the halftime drill driver, did. They invented a power drill attachment that lets you drill, flip, and drive in seconds. Brian and Alice licensed their invention to the company that brought you the Snuggie, and it's now selling in major retailers nationwide. Look for the Invent Help caveman on the package. If you have an invention that you would like to try to patent and submit to companies for possible review and want free information on how Invent Help may be able to assist you, call now. Invent Help is America's largest inventor service company with sales offices in more than 60 cities nationwide. Call Invent Help today for free information. Our clients made a financial gain with their invention, but this is just their individual result. Brian and Alice's experience is not typical, as only a very small number of inventions are licensed or sold in stores.
For your free inventors information, call 1-800-559-8567. That's 1-800-559-8567.
If you had a choice between going bald and a full head of hair, which would you choose? Advances in medical science have resulted in the world's first and only permanent solution to hair loss.
Yes!
You wash it, you cut it. It's your own real, naturally growing hair. When it comes to hair restoration, no one in the world has more experience than Bosley. The results look completely natural and are affordable on nearly any budget. But the entire process can't be explained in 60 brief seconds. So to find out more about this clinically proven and permanent solution to hair loss, call now to receive your free no-obligation information kit. It'll answer all of your questions about hair loss and hair restoration. Plus, we'll also send you this $250 gift certificate just for calling. Every day you wait, you're losing more hair. So don't put it off any longer. You owe it to yourself to find out the facts. Choose hair. Choose Bosley.
Call 800-868-9957. That's 800-868-9957.
And welcome back. We're wrapping up with our CBN News All Star panel. Gentlemen, we only have about a minute left, but I wanted to hear from each of you on which story or stories you're watching over the remainder of the year. What should we be watching for? John, we'll start with you.
Well, Eric, I'm going to be watching, whether I want to or not, the Middle East peace process. And it seems like it's dead, but it's like Jason in Friday the 13th. You think a stake is driven through it because it's based on an unreality of the two-state solutions just not working. But I don't think the West and the diplomatic establishment can live without it, and I think they're going to force a resumption of the peace talks.
Gary, how about you? What are you watching for the remainder of 2014?
Well, of course, Eric, I'll be watching Egypt, but I think Egypt will stabilize if Sisi is elected as president. But beyond that, Syria. Syria will continue to be an issue, even though it's a bit of a stalemate at this time. 1 million refugees now registered in Lebanon. That's just unbelievable. That would be like 80 million people in 3 years coming into the United States, if you look at it proportionally. Tremendous suffering there, also for the Christian community. You'll see a mass exodus of Christians continue, and more suffering, I'm sad to say.
Well, Chris, we got to wrap up real quick. Chris, just a few seconds. What are you watching in 2014, the rest of the year?
Well, Eric, I'd watch the city of Jerusalem. 2,000 years ago, all roads led to Rome. 2,000 years later, they're leading to Jerusalem. Watch what happens with this city.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. And until next time, from the Watchman, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.